Salzer.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan.
Here.
Mrs. Davenport. Mr. Hillman.
Here.
Mrs. Callen, absent. Mrs. Petropoulos.
Here.
And Mrs. Lamel.
Here.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You know, we have a pretty crowded gallery today. A lot of our teachers are here for our presentation on our standards-based grading. They're here for, they were part of the committee, so I'm very glad that they're going to be here. And if we have any questions, we can definitely ask them and put them on the spot. We also have representation from our unions, as well as Mr. O'Hara from one of our printer companies. So welcome everyone. Thank you very much for coming.
Presentation.
Yes. So, so myself and Megan Knopfnagel will be presenting standards-based grading and what the committee has been talking about and some recommendations that we have to present to the board today. So we're going to go ahead and get that started. All right, so you can see the committee members. If you're a committee member, if you don't mind raising your hand so they can see all of those people who are on the committee who work. And it's been a lot of work. It's something that they've been focusing on for quite a while, even before I had the opportunity to step into this role in this district. And in all, it's a 14-member committee that is made up of K-8 teachers as well as special area teachers. We have looked at the research, both the research for and the research that says you might want to pump the brakes a little bit, and we've tried to bring that all together. We've collected and reviewed documents from other districts. We've done it all over the state, all over the country, but just some other districts locally that we've looked at. We looked at ELSIF 126, Palos 128, Oaklawn Hometown. We've also looked at Orland 135, and just to kind of see exactly what people have done, what has worked well for them, and some pitfalls that they have found going through it. And specifically, we were looking at the performance indicators, the report cards, and the rubrics that the teachers would be using in class. The biggest work so far has been really looking at the grade level standards and seeing what it is that we have done a nice job teaching, what are some areas that we still have some concern that we should be teaching, but we may have had some pockets here and there, updating the scopes and the sequence to reflect those learning standards, and then developing the timeline for the rollout. And you guys have heard a timeline from before, and then I shared with one a couple months ago that we're looking at, and that has not changed since we spoke before. We'll look at that exact timeline in a little bit. Really the biggest question is why the change? And this is a slide we're going to end the presentation on as well, because it's really important if we're going to make a gigantic investment, a gigantic change, really to understand why are we doing this. And the biggest thing is that all of us who receive report cards, I mean, as we were kids, those of us who look at our own children's report cards and we see they got an A in math. And that's great. We know, hey, they're probably doing pretty well. But we don't always know what goes into that. And I look at my own son who's in second grade and has done addition and subtraction. If he didn't have standards-based and we didn't get a chance to talk to the teacher, I wouldn't know, all right, maybe he was good in addition, but subtraction gave him a lot of difficulty. And the point of the standards-based is to really spell that out so that you see where the child is doing on each of those standards. And again, to better align with current instructional practices, I don't think any of us would agree that our classrooms look anything like they did when our traditional report cards were in place, where students were expected to be compliant and to sit in desks and in rows and make sure they got everything turned in, and as long as you listened to the teacher and did what you were supposed to, you'd probably get a pretty good grade. Instructional practices are much different now, and we want to know exactly what the students are able to do. And then to me, the biggest thing on the end there is to provide that specific feedback on student progress. So that should go both to the parents and to the students. Students should know how they are doing on specific standards. Is it something that they have to put in more work, or is it something like, I'm doing pretty well on this and maybe I can even bump up a little bit more if I put some more effort in. So what is a standards-based report card? you taking that?
Sure.
Okay.
So a standards-based report card assesses students on their performance in a specific area, an observable area or skill. And we'll talk more about, it doesn't give you just a grade in reading, it gives you a specific area, like Adam was saying, within that content area. It also measures students on these standards, or learning targets is what they're called, towards the end of the year. So you get to see that progression of the students in those specific skill areas from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. You're not just seeing in reading A, but you're seeing what they're doing in first trimester, what they're doing in second trimester, and what they're doing in third trimester, and specifically how they're doing in each one of those areas. It also allows the teachers to identify standards that are not yet attempted based on their scope and sequence, but then it also allows those teachers to really have those conversations with parents based on those specific standards when they're meeting with parents or talking with parents about how their child is doing or where their child needs to continue to grow. So this is an example, this is just one example, just for a visual purpose of what a standards-based report card could look like. This is not the final end-all be-all. This is a process, and we're so thankful that our current teacher-ese, which is our data entry, it's what reports out our grades and what we or print at the elementary level our report cards from, but at the junior high level you get that portal part of it. They can do standards-based reporting. They can do standards-based grading within the system, and so it's a great opportunity for us and our teachers to use something that they're already very familiar with and just update it and change it a little bit to align to this current process that we're looking to go towards. So what you'll see specifically, and it might be better if I kind of point it out here for you, instead of this just being reading and math and writing, you'll see the content level area, and then it's broken down by these subcategories, and then subcategories underneath have learning targets. And that's really what teachers call them, and that's what our teachers have really been calling them over the last year, are learning targets. So what is the target that we want the child to get to by the end of the year? And so this one says, I use grade level phonics skills when decoding words. And we really want it to be purposeful for the student and purposeful for the parent. So no more just reading, but what can the students do? And then there's some ownership in it because it will, I'm sorry, I touched the board and I wasn't sure if I was going to advance the slide. That the student is able to communicate, here's what I can do, and here's now how I can set a goal of what I might not be doing, exactly what is expected of me yet. And then here are these numbers that we'll talk a little bit more about, and these are rating the students on their mastery of that specific skill. So you'll see 2s and 3s or NAs for not applicable. And again, this is an example. This might not look exactly like this. Some districts use blanks here. Some use, they black it out or X it out, and that just goes to tell that this is not an assessed skill or standard at this time. But this is basically the overall. The committee really wanted to make sure that the report cards that we end up going towards in the end are not this long. They wanted it to be easy for the parent to understand, easy for the parent to look at and get a real gauge on what their student is successful with and where they need to grow. So they were really hoping it to be like a one-pager of information that would be sent home. So here, the teachers have done a lot of work with standards, looking at the standards, and determining how we can take what is a massive amount of standards and put them into learning targets. If we didn't want to send home a packet like this, that's what it would be. If we put every single standard and reported out in every single standard in Common Core standards, science, NGSS, new social science standards, all of this, it would be this packet. And so we really had a conversation about how do we minimize that communication without losing what it really means and what those skills really are. So we're calling them learning targets. And the learning targets were selected based on the Common Core state standards, and the grade levels and special area teachers met at the end of last school year, April 2nd. It's definitely, I remember that day as we were all sitting there, we're doing all this work, and they decided to cluster certain standards in groups and create a learning target that would then be reported out on the report card. And they then indicated, the standards themselves will indicate the mastery of the students, how they're doing throughout each trimester, and then where they should be at the end of the trimester, at the end of their grade level. So just as a visual for you, if you go on Common Core StateStandards.com, this is the image that you see. This is, surprisingly enough, one reading standard. So this is RL, which is literature, grade 1, standard 1. There are 9 to 10 standards for literature, and then 9 to 10 standards for informational text, just for first grade reading, not to mention then writing and language and phonics and foundational skills and all of that. So what the teachers decided to do is they took these 3 standards and they synthesized the words and really looked deeply at what is it that they're asking, what are we asking our students to have mastered by the end of first grade, and they then put it into this one line. So 3 of these standards, parts of the standard, and so this is key ideas and details for a first grade literature standard, and then this says student can demonstrate understanding of key ideas and details. And then there's a lot of common language. The teachers did this all last year on their own, every grade level, for the entire kindergarten team got together, the entire first grade team got together, and when they did it all independently with their teams, when we got them all back together and looked at what they did, there's a lot of common language within the standards. So a lot of the kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, this here says students can demonstrate understanding of key ideas and details. It's just with a different text complexity. It's just at a different grade level. And so there was a lot of common language. So every year we're not recreating the wheel and we're not, confusing parents when it comes to, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean? Now by that point, we would be able to communicate to all, this is what it means. So on the report cards, we're hoping to have 3 types of learning targets: an academic area, a specials area, and then an LCL standards area, and we'll talk more about that. So how does this look different than what our current report cards are saying? So the old report card, we'll call it the old report card, we should say current, the current report card has grades for reading, maybe phonics. The new report card will go into details much more like this. Students can ask and answer questions using evidence from text. Knows and applies grade level phonics and word analysis skills and decoding, and then students can master or have a mastery of skills, both fiction and nonfiction. And that's like Dr. Thorns-Adams, he was saying, it's really powerful to know. My daughter also has standards-based grading, and it's very powerful to know that she's very successful in fiction. She reads really well, she applies her skills in fiction, but nonfiction is an area where she needs to read more of. And so that's something that I can do as a parent to support her. I can go to the library and get her more nonfiction text just to read and get that exposure. For math, the current, you're getting math grade. That doesn't tell you how your child is doing in algebra or geometry, measurement and data, operations, addition, subtraction. But the new report card would give you more specifics on place value, different operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, solving problems, like word problems, problem solving, critical thinking, and then communicating math in a clear thinking way, either written or problem solving. So.
All right, so I'm going to take over after spending all that time last year and moving into this year. What are the recommendations specifically from the committee? And the new grading key, a numeric system, you would see 4, 3, 2, 1, and the 4 is exceeded standards, and you can see what it says, exactly what that would mean. 3 is meeting standards. 2 would be sometimes meeting standards, like they get it some of the time. They're progressing towards that understanding, but they don't really have it all the time. And then 1 would be does not yet meet standards. So they're still working towards that, but they're not really showing that they have an understanding. This would be an example of what it could look like kind of blown up from before. You'd have reading, and then under literature, and then the 3 learning targets. and then showing, all right, this student in trimester 1 was struggling with integration of knowledge and ideas, but then in trimester 2 had shown great progress and was meeting that. So what other changes will we see? Honor roll would obviously have to change, and we've seen it done in many different ways. But one would be if a student is receiving all 3s and 4s, that would be an option for honor roll. But there's different ways to do that. Parents will see assessments linked to standards. We are hoping that they will see that this assessment that the students were given meets these learning targets, these standards that we have. And I know at one of our previous board meetings it was brought up, and I think it's a great point. We don't want to assess our students to death. So it's not the idea of all of a sudden just testing, but seeing what we currently have as assessments and making sure those are lining up. And if we have to make adjustments, now would be the time to make sure that gets done. And then the SEL standards would replace the behavior and the conduct grade. And these are examples of what the SEL standards would look like, the social emotional learning standards. Goal 1, develop self-awareness and self-management skills. And it would kind of let the parents know and the students know where they're doing in the classroom for these. And we have use social awareness to establish positive relationships and demonstrate decision-making skills. So when the rollout, and we talked about this timeline, we would be looking at K through 3rd grade, beginning the 21-22 school year. So those students who are in 2nd grade and have never received a letter grade in their life would move right into this and continue down that path. Our 4th and 5th graders the following year would be looking at it. And then junior high is to be determined. And the reason it's to be determined is we are still talking about over and over as a committee, what do we want to do with junior high? There's many options. You could continue to have letter grades. You could go to the 4-3-2-1 system. There's hybrid models out there. But I think what's important to balance out with our junior high students is making sure that they are ready for high school. And part of that, I definitely think if we went to a standards, they would be ready. But they also, when they get to high school, have to have that knowledge of how letter grades work. And I don't know if we don't give them some of that, I anticipate a struggle for some of them when they get over to Richards. And so we need to continue to talk about that as a committee. And it's very interesting talking with other districts. It's usually that K-5 that almost all districts are looking at going, and then some districts have gone, 6th through 8th have gone to standards, and then others have just left that alone completely. All right.
So yeah, Q&A. We do know that many districts have already gone through this process, and we're thankful for that because now we can fix their problems before they become our problems, and we can proactively think about that. So we have some questions that we know have been that have come up through other districts when they've made this rollout, or what we proactively anticipate some questions being for our school district. And so we want to get those answers to you now, and then we'll leave some time at the end if there are any other questions. So what does a standards-based report card tell parents? It really does tell the parent specifically about their child's learning. So detailed information about where their child is at and how they're progressing towards meeting the grade level standards. Will the standards be listed on the report card? This is something that we really wanted to make sure was we communicated the standards but didn't overwhelm with all of the standards, and so they will not all be listed on the report card. We have synthesized the standards into these learning targets, and then the learning targets will be what were on the report card to report out on clusters of standards instead. What are the comparisons between letter grades and a number system? If I could have one, they're not the same. They cannot be compared. But a 4-3-2-1 scale cannot be compared to the traditional A, B, C, D, F in any way. A mark of a 3 in this, which is meeting grade level standards according to our table, meeting grade level standards cannot be, in our mind, switched to a B or an A. A 4 cannot be assigned an A. So we really have to change our mindset on on that system. And you can go ahead and flip to the.
I just want to touch base on this. So I think this is important as we go through it for parents to understand, but it's important for teachers to understand it as well. I give the example of my son when he was in kindergarten, first grade, it was the first year they had rolled it out, and his teacher, I don't know what kind of training they received, but said, this is what the district wants me to give to you for standards. Here's what his letter grade really is. And she didn't know what I did or as a living or anything when I'm sitting there. And that's an issue, and that means that there was not enough good professional development, and there wasn't enough to let the parents know exactly what it meant.
And so why are there no letter grades? There would be no letter grades because there is a traditional mindset, and much like Adam had said at the beginning, our classrooms are not the same, and our standards are not the same when those A, B, C, D, Fs were, invented, developed. And so we really need to make sure that we're aligning what's happening in the classroom to how we're grading in the classroom to how we're reporting what's happening in the classroom. And why will we transition to number grades? It shows a progression towards the standard. You see the 4, the 2, the 3, the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, and you get that opportunity to see that growth within your own child.
So how will this system be motivating for students? And this is a question I have asked every educator I know who has gone through this. They no longer have to come home and say, I got an A or a B, or they might not necessarily have to do all their homework right away to see how they did. The research has shown that students do become more motivated when it's clear what it is that they need to do to reach something. Instead of handing something in, not knowing how grades are computed, not knowing if behavior is still somehow being put into the grades, when it's clear what they need to do, that's when they see motivation. And it's been interesting talking to a lot of junior highs who've gone through this, and I've talked to our administrators, that initially you do see a dip as far as their motivation. It doesn't last long, but it could last a quarter or a trimester or two, and then they start realizing, I'm falling behind. And I think we don't give our junior high students always enough credit that they will pull themselves up. But in talking with those administrators, that's what they have seen, that there's an initial dip because they think they can get away with something, and then realize that they are falling behind. When grades are used as consequences for students who do not comply, such practices not only have no educational value, but they adversely affect students. And just kind of watching this district and really the educational field overall, I think we're starting to understand that in the field of education, that punishing students for not doing compliance isn't going to help them understand something more. Teaching them and them understanding what they need to learn, that's going to help them. And the best motivations for students is removing the threat of judging them when they take risks and make mistakes. Students need to know that they can be comfortable to take those risks and not to just study for that one test, but that they are really trying to progress in their education overall. And I think this is really important, the bottom one. Standards-based grading is designed to be accurate, fair, and recognizes student learning rather than compliance, rather than just turning in your homework every day. But it is, what are they actually learning? How will students with an IEP graded? An IEP be graded? Will they be graded differently? What about our English learners? Students will still be graded on mastery of learning target. And it's important to know that students with an IEP or students who do receive EL services, their team is going to sit down and decide what modifications need to take place. Then the student is graded based on the progress towards those specific modified goals that would be there. And accommodations or modifications would be noticed on the report card, but not necessarily a transcript that would be moving on. And I bring us back to the last slide before we open it up to questions, but why the change? Why are we looking at doing something that really upends everything that parents know about how to judge their students? And it gets back to really being able to effectively communicate how their students are doing and how the students themselves are doing. That to me is what it all goes back to. So I think that's it for our presentation, and I'm sure there will be a few questions.
And then we want to, of course, thank Sherry and Jill and Terry for being here. They are part of the committee. Sherry, you had...
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. I took a note while you guys were working. So part of the thing as a parent, when we switch to this, it's not just the report card, but the students understanding what their target goals are, like on the rubrics, then they can see what they need to do for that assignment, but then that also comes home. So my kids were on this standards-based grading. So before I even got the report card, I had a pretty good sense of their learning goals and targets, because it would, whatever assignment it was, put to it would be the little rubric that had everything. So I could really discuss with my kids and have a better understanding than just say A or whatever by the time the report card came out. So it's a different way of us teaching and approaching how we're presenting it to the students, because it's kind of backwards. They understand what that goal is, and then it's also communicated, I think, back to the parents that way.
Throughout, not just at the end
Right,
of the trimester.
it's not just that, like, trimester report card, it's throughout the trimester.
Thank you. All right, like I said, we threw a lot of information. What kinds of questions do we have?
I actually have two, but are we going to have some kind of meeting or professional development for parents?
Yes, and that was part of pushing the timeline, is to make sure that we have lots of meetings, not just one, but because it's going to be just kind of like today. You present the information, people are going to get some of it, and then they're going to come back with more questions. So giving that open communication to be able to just walk them through that.
Is that why the timeline is a year from now?
That and all the work,
next fall?
and all the work that we have to do with our assessments and making sure everything is aligned. Yeah.
Is there a reason why the 4 through 5 is delayed an additional year beyond the K through 3?
Yeah, we just wanted to make sure that we gave ourselves the time, and that if we did see any issues with the K3, we'd be able to fix it before it rolled out to the other two.
And the way you have the timeline too, you've got those kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, and then those third graders who hit it, am I right? Are the third graders going to hit it when it comes time for fourth and fifth to go in, come online?
So they'll be
Yeah.
prepped for it.
Right, so
they'll
and they
have
won't know any
assignments
different.
adopted.
Yeah,
But
they'll
the
be
fourth
used to
won't
that.
be. The grade 4 won't be. When they
No,
get 5.
it will be, because they will become the fourth graders.
Yeah.
But
And
the
then, oh,
fourth
you're talking
graders
the fourth
will become
grader,
the
yes.
fifth graders, and they will
Correct.
not be.
Yes,
No.
that's correct.
Then I have one more question, and then everybody else,
Yeah.
I'll just shut my mouth. I think this is a good thing, and I understand it, and I understand why, okay? I'm glad I don't have to do it. And I give you credit, because you guys seem like you're really on top of what's going on. My biggest thing was, what about homework and projects? If the kids don't do it. I mean, I know on the report card, you're just going with, okay, they have met the standards and everything. So what if they don't do this, this, and this? So how do we, it's about compliance. That part's compliance, it's about responsibility. To me, it's always been about responsibility.
How much homework does K get?
Right, because we're not
Does
talking
1
junior
get,
high school.
and does 2
No, it's
get,
K-5, not
and 3 get?
Yeah, but still, they get homework.
And we do have a policy that doesn't allow that 0. There is that time for that support and that remediation. If the child forgets it or doesn't do it, the teachers are to follow up with the student and help them figure out when they can do it or get it done to get it done. But the homework itself is more of that practice component of things. Most of the grades would be coming from the in-class instruction.
Well,
Most
that-
of the grades.
That philosophy is fantastic, but I know that in some districts where this is rolled out, unfortunately, kids start to come to the older ones at least to realize homework doesn't matter and homework doesn't count, and they're not doing it. And then when they get up to the higher levels, as Adam
Yep.
said, prepping them with the grades. If, for instance, in junior high, if they have this and they come to high school, all of a sudden they have to start doing all this homework at home, and it counts, and it doesn't. So I'm wondering, how is the grade going to be figured out? Is there going to be a certain amount of classwork that is for mastery, but if they don't do it, then, I mean, there are kids who are just never gonna do homework and always do great on tests. And then there's kids who need that homework and need that, I hate to say negative reinforcement, but negative reinforcement is like accountability. So I'm not sure. I know that all the data shows that this is the best way to go, but I do wonder about that, the idea of having the responsibilities.
But that's not changing at the junior high level. We're still only talking.
No, but I
K-5.
mean, like, I feel like even my 4th and 5th grade, like, kids who are getting older would get, like, I don't have to do the homework really.
And it's a culture
No,
shock,
I
then when
know.
they get to junior high, and all of a sudden, now I have to do it. And I haven't done it all these years. I mean,
But I think you
that
kinda-
part of it doesn't
You
seem
currently
right to
have
me.
the alternative in the grading system. What about kids that don't do their homework, get F's, but actually know the information inside and out? You can take a test and get a really good grade, don't do the homework, but get the F. I mean, I think there's gonna be the same argument on both sides. I don't think that's a
True.
productive argument
But it's
to
about the
make.
responsibility.
And you have to also, the other thing that we have to
That's
do.
not
Non-standards-based grading.
But I don't think standards-based grading implies that you have a lack of responsibility, and perhaps homework could be something that's incorporated into one of the clusters, I don't know. But just to say there's no responsibility with this, I think that's just a false argument to make.
Well, I
that's
think most
baseless.
kids will do their homework with their
And
parents.
how much homework is there
Yeah.
between K and 5 at the elementary schools here? I remember my kids didn't really
Not much.
get any.
Anyone want to come to my house, because I have a second grader and a fifth grader, and we have homework every night. So, I would say, yeah, there is homework, but I feel like as a parent in the district, and most parents, we do the homework. So, and I wouldn't stop doing it just because maybe it doesn't directly impact their grade. Obviously, the learning does. So the hope is that the homework's still gonna get done. I was just asking, like, what were the thoughts on that? I do have another question as well about, I know that the 1, 2, 3, 4 does not transfer to A, B, C, D, but on some level, everyone has been ingrained their entire life to transfer it that way. And especially when you start talking about honor system and honor roll, you know, if we're saying that 3 is mastery and that's really all that we expect, if we're giving rewards then or awards for people who get 4s, then we're just saying the kids who are really doing what they're supposed to be doing are not getting awards. So I am concerned then the training and the levels of what determines what a 4 is, because the way I look at this on here is that this is a kid who is a beyond what is expected out of a third grader. So,
Yeah.
and that should only be, I mean, if you think about the curve of students in a class and the level, you know, you always want to teach to the top, but that getting a 4 should not be, and I like the equitability according to A, B, C, D to the standards. I think it's great, this idea of meeting standards, and then I wonder, and I'm even thinking devil's advocate for the teachers, how many parents are gonna be like, well, how come they didn't get 4s, you know? So I just wonder, like, I know that the year of training, I feel like this is gonna be a really hard pill to swallow for, and even for teachers, I don't know how they'll.
Yeah, and we would really have to work on what the honor roll criteria would get, you know, and what would that criteria be and what those expectations are. And the committee did talk a lot about, do we have an exceeding, do we not have an exceeding? Because how do you determine if they're exceeding or not? And really there are 3 or 4 different options of ways that you can present information to a student for them to go to the next level. And that is a conversation that we will so thankfully have this next year to talk about. Because you can give a student, you know, if they teach another student that concept, that can be considered to be, they're exceeding. They can teach it. They have to do the next grade level work. So it's the same standard because there is a continuation of the standard, but if they're in 4th grade, you know, the RL, you know, 4.1, they would be given the learning target and work for 5.1 RL. So there are many different ways to you know, share exceeding type work with the students. And that's all conversations that the committee and the district will have to determine what kind of options do we have out there for our students for them to exceed their grade level standards.
Well, I feel like meets is a very broad spectrum, like anyone who gets evaluated on the Danielson model, like proficient, sounds like a negative word, but most people fall in the proficient category, and sometimes it's detrimental, like, so if a kid is constantly just meeting, but they don't feel like that's anything special, actually meeting is special, that's what they're supposed to be doing. So I feel like kids who just meet, that is a good thing too. So I'm just like bringing that thought to the table of hoping that there is still something, you know, for meeting, because that is what we're really asking to do. Meets, if you were gonna make it equitable, should be an A. Like,
Well, and Chrissy,
exceeds is a kid who, you
to
know.
answer your honor roll question, most districts that we looked at that do still have an honor roll, do anyone who gets all 3s or above, that's usually when they would make it.
So is the, because I had the question about the 4 and exceeding as well, is that still having conversation, or that is a definite 1 through 4 scale?
That was the recommendation from the committee.
The determination
From kindergarten on? Like every grade level? Okay.
What is your
and then
concern with it then?
my concern was just that meeting is the goal. So what, if they're exceeding, great, that's fantastic. We will applaud you or give you a sticker, but
then it's gonna,
why does
kids
it
are
need to
gonna
be a 4
feel
on
like,
a
why
report card?
can't I get to that 4?
Right,
what
that's
my
not the
concern
end
was.
goal, that's not what you're necessarily pitching for. So that's my concern with that. And then looking at the sample report card, there was the targets and the subject. Is that how the committee would do it as well, giving a number, an overall number for each subject, or
No.
just for each target?
We had talked about just for each learning target, yeah, not average, because then you're losing the validity of the
Yes.
number when you average it to the overall grade. And then you're back to giving a reading grade, and we feel that parents, because that might be an area where they feel most comfortable at, just looking for reading or math grades,
Yeah.
they might not look at the detailed feedback that we would be providing. And so the detailed learning targets would give the grade, but the title would just be reading.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then were all of the learning targets for each grade level already decided?
So the work has been done already, like from April 2nd up until now. The staff has finalized learning targets for ELA, math, science we're still working on, because there's content science, and then there's application science. And so the conversation at our committee meeting has been, which one do we want to grade kindergartners or second graders on? Do they know the states of matter, or can they apply a three-dimensional model in a vague description? And so that conversation is still being had, but they're all based on the NGSS standards, and that work has been done, but just which direction do we go with it?
And then will the target standards change from trimester to trimester, or they will stay the same and just say NA if they were not assessed, but no new one? You wouldn't be swapping any out?
Be bringing some in
Yeah.
if they were not. So when we talked, we didn't want it to be 14 pages long. The ones that, when they're addressed for that trimester, that's when they will come on. If they're addressed in all three, then they would stay on there with the different.
Okay, so it would look, different targets would be specified in different trimesters. You wouldn't see the same thing.
But the staff would know what the end targets are now.
Right.
And we could share that out even through a parent university of like, this is what the learning targets are for a kindergarten student by the end of the year, but each trimester you'll see what they're being instructed and then graded and then assessed and reported on.
Okay.
And like I said, we're so thankful. Teacher E's they're wonderful, and they're able to take the learning targets, the work that the staff has done, and put them into their system. And they're able to do a lot of different visual type things with what we want. And that it's really great, because a lot of schools have to adopt an entirely new program than what they're used to if it doesn't align.
Here's, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, the one thing that I wanted to say, I know that you're thinking, waiting with junior high school, and that's the other thing that I know that at Finley you guys do work with Richards and stuff like that, and Richards has totally changed what they're doing as well. I mean, they have, their whole system is totally different. They are, there is a standard test that they take, and you have to pass the test. And there's no there is no more of the smart kid who doesn't get the homework and aces the test can pass the class. No, it is a third, and a third, or whatever exactly what it is. So
I agree.
So
I'm
it is
experiencing
yeah,
that firsthand. For someone who doesn't want to do
So,
it.
and I mean, and so that's why I think, in some ways it might not be good to put it at the junior high school level. Is how do you get that transition to it? And I agree that having everybody being on the same playing level is good. Because from where I was, I had a son who never did the homework, knew everything. And I actually had 3 Richards High School's teachers say to me, I would suggest you sign this piece of paper saying that you waive Benjamin's homework and all of the other type of stuff. And I said, why? He goes, his grade will go from an F to an A. Okay. And that was what we needed to do. But then I look and I'm like, what did that show? You know what I mean? So they've put those processes in there to have those pieces that need to go together, and I think in a way we need to somehow put them from this in the 5th grade, up to 5th grade, to transitioning them to that same thing. I mean, not necessarily going from one to the other, but you know what, high school is harder than heck as it is when you're going. I mean, you think about us, we go from 2 schools into 1, and that's a little bit of transition. Then you go over there and you're like with people who you've never seen before, and in different economic and racial backgrounds, that if their total scaling and what they need to do to be successful changes too, you're going to have kids under desks crying, to to be honest with you. So I really think that somehow we have to, that junior high school is where you're gonna have to bridge this difference. But I think showing them exactly what they need to do, I've said that as a parent. I am not a teacher, I don't have that, but I would really like if somebody said to me, here you go, this is what Annalisa needs to learn in first grade. Give it to me on the first day so that I know if we're doing it. And if we're at the end of the year and there's 6 things at the end of the year, I'll be like, Megan, we're not doing these, isn't that what they're supposed to learn? And if I get transferred to my job and I go out to California or somewhere else in Illinois, I know that if I'm in this time of the year, my daughter is still gonna learn the same thing. She's not gonna go to another school and be like totally behind because they're not meeting the standards or whatever. So that, I mean, I know that's like universal school, and everything, but that is a big thing when we think about these children are coming, we have a lot of transients, and if they all are, if every school and everywhere is getting to it, and if they're doing the standards, then all the kids will be successful, whether they're in our district or somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So I see where that is, where this is definitely good, and just trying to do that transition to grade school to high school is gonna be, that's where I think the rough part is gonna be, to be honest with you.
I agree.
Any other questions?
I don't understand this argument about not having a 4.
About not having a 4?
Yeah. What is the cons against having the 4? I didn't see an issue with it when you were presenting, but clearly if people have an issue with it, I must be missing something.
Yeah, I think the biggest difficulty is if you do have a 4, making sure that everyone understands what it means to exceed, and making sure it's not different from one teacher to the other, saying, well, this kid is exceeding, but another teacher said, no, they're meeting, and making sure that it's just accurate all the way.
What I bar on there, then like it gives the impression that like that's where my kids should be. So I see it from the perspective of like, no, actually your kid should be at meets, and they're not doing something wrong by not getting that E. Right now in the lower levels they have the S system, correct? S, S plus, X minus. So my child's report card kept coming home all S's, and I'm like, what's going on? Why are you just satisfactory? You should be getting S pluses. And then when I talk to the teacher, like, no, S is what you should get. S plus is like for extra. Even still, as an educator for 17 years, I still want my kid to be getting S pluses. So I feel like that's where it comes, because if you see that there is an E category, that upper category, then you're always thinking like, well, shouldn't they be getting there? And I think it is a teacher thing though too, that I don't know.
Are you suggesting it be eliminated and 3 be meets and or exceeds, and it just be one clump under 3? Is that what you're suggesting?
I think that I'm on the fence about it. That's why I asked Tiffany what she meant, because I'm unsure too. I'm a little bit on the fence. I do think that kids who are exceeding, their parents should have a way of knowing that my student is exceeding here, because when you do get to high school, they do have advanced placement classes, they do have honors classes, so they do still track students in different ways to help the kids who are on a different kind of playing field, so to speak, with learning.
I agree, what I'm saying is then, is your issue just caution that the parents be educated on how it's
It could be that, but I also
or
feel like it's
there shouldn't be a 4? I guess I don't even know what the
I've
problem is.
suggested there shouldn't be a 4.
Yeah.
You think 3 should be meets and or exceeds?
I think that teacher could
but
make
it's also
comments
not
if a
our
student is exceeding thoroughly in a different spot. I think having the exceeds on there does make it seem as if that's what we're
the
trying
bar
to
is,
get
that's
them
what
to
you're trying
be.
to get.
Yeah.
I guess the question comes down to, again, is coming back to what our culture has said. How many parents, and you don't have to tell me this, but honestly are happy if their kid comes home with a C? No, you want your kids getting A's and B's, but in reality, don't you want your child to make sure that C means that they are average? They are like majority of their peers. That's good, and they should be doing something special to have a B, and better be damn good to have an A.
I don't know if I agree with that.
But that's what the problem
But at the
is
same
C
token,
means
there-
you're average and you're doing what you're supposed to do. You're with your peers. And then your B is a little bit more and your A is, so when you're
I
putting this
disagree.
standards based.
Unless you're on a weighted curve, you can have the whole class getting A's. So C doesn't necessarily mean average. I mean, I guess I don't understand how
That's the
you're
way it
looking at
should be though, that's
It's
what
not
we're
that
saying.
way.
Yeah, and you know what, I'm just saying that, you
I think
know,
that's just a semantical issue.
And I will
It's a
say,
perception.
looking at
But we're
all
also
the
arguing
districts,
about honor roll. So, I mean, okay, so then why are we even talking about honor roll in these schools?
yeah,
Why
That's
should
why I
a
brought it
third
up,
grader have
yeah.
an honor roll?
they don't,
Well, whatever,
yeah,
you know what I'm
they don't.
saying.
Yeah, I know what you're saying though.
I don't know if this will clarify anything, I don't even know if anybody will agree with me. I've always believed similar to what you're saying, and it's okay to be here.
But even when you're teaching or as a parent, I always wanted my kids to go for more.
Yeah.
So you have to have some kind of bar here to get them to rise up and meet it. You can't set it down here because a lot of kids, and you can't say they won't, but a lot of kids will just stay there. You want to have at least something for kids to aim for, to pull them up. And that's what I believe. And I'm with you. C is okay. If that's the best you could do, that's okay. But I want them to see A's and B's too. You better work for it.
Okay, so let's say the standard is you have to run a mile in 12 minutes. Okay, and that's your 3. And let's say I can get out there and run it in 6. That would be a 4. I think that's pretty clear, right? Wouldn't that be a 4?
Yeah.
So I don't think conceptually this is that complicated, and I don't think we're giving our constituents too much credit for their ability to understand the concept of a 3 versus a 4.
Well,
Now, if you're saying you don't think
something.
that teachers can actually make that assessment fairly, well, that's a whole nother problem.
I think it's both
But I think
things.
conceptually, people will understand a 4 in comparison to a 3.
And-
I don't know.
And I will say the districts we looked at, and this is the same argument that every district we looked at had. Some have the 1, 2, 3, some have the 1, 2, 3, 4. So it is, and all these ideas that we brought up are things that we talked about in the committee.
Why did the committee decide on putting the 4 in then?
Our big recommendation was for those students who are reaching above and beyond, that we want to show and recognize
You
that.
want to have them come up and meet something, not just sit down here. That's my opinion.
Any other questions? I would really like, again, to thank those committee members who came out tonight. I think it really shows that they do have buy-in and that it does mean a lot to them, so we really do appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you all for those of you that worked on this. Thank you very much.
It's not easy to break down all those standards.
Wow. I guess I'm glad I'm not doing it. I'm glad I'm fast.
I took it, I stole it. Making notes. Oh, I didn't know I had
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
4.0, we have to talk, potential board action to accept check from Enchanted Backpack for staff appreciation in the amount of $750.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Ms. Davenport.
Aye.
Mr. Hillman.
Aye.
Mrs. Callen.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Lamb.
Aye.
And Mrs. Halsey.
Aye. Approval of consent agenda, the minutes from January 14th through the 28th, including open, closed, and study session.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Mrs. Lamb.
Aye.
Ms. Davenport.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Callen.
Aye.
Mr. Hillman.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Mrs. Halsey.
Aye. We have financial reports. Yeah. No, we're going right through that?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, our first up is our PTA report. I did survive the volleyball game with no broken bones or anything, so that was good. It was a nice mixture of kids who were there, so we had a lot of fun, and the staff definitely won, so that was great. I believe their next event is the movie night.
Is the 21st.
Yes,
So
and
it'll be Ridge Central.
Arctic Dogs is for the younger students,
And they don't know what the older.
and Catching Fire for the older. I know John Cena's in
That's
it
a
because
good
I looked it up. So
Yeah.
haven't seen it, but that's our next.
And they seem, and having the 2 movies we've done, this will be the 3rd time that we've done it, it seems to be a better. So then you've got the younger kids.
On February
you know.
21st?
Yes,
21st, yeah.
next Friday.
Do you have a license to show movies?
I don't know,
Thank you.
but we believe it costs $50 to $75 if we do go. I'll have to find out.
There's always that copyright thing. And
What time
is
I
it?
just tell my students we're gonna risk it.
And my grandsons.
For our school and department reports, we did celebrate our 100th day of school, so you get to see some pictures in there. Also, another event coming up is on the 20th. We have our EL Family Night, which has a carnival circus theme. So I'm very excited to see that. That will be at Ridge Lawn from 5 to 6 p.m. I know Dr. Mendoza has also been working with the library for that, so it's been nice to see that partnership continue. So we have that coming up. Down into our enrollment report. Our enrollment in January was 1,473 students. That is down 66 students from last year, but we are up 16 students from last month. So we continue to monitor that, and as I've shared with the board before, we're really spaced out all over where those numbers have been taken from. It doesn't seem like it's just at one school or one particular grade level, but we'll continue to monitor that to see. And I know, even talking with the principals before these numbers came in, they just felt that we've been having a lot more students come in over the last couple weeks. Our vacant positions and possible staffing needs. Right now we are looking for a float custodian. It does look like we found a reading specialist to fill that position for a while. We have many paraprofessionals that we'll talk about later that are still unfilled. And then we just have some other positions that are kind of up in the air right now that we'll discuss later. In your packet, you will find 2 drafts of the calendar that was given to the union last week to take a look at and to start offering some feedback. Hopefully you had a chance to take a look at them. The biggest differences on our draft option number 1 is that the students would get that full week off at Thanksgiving. The spring break is 1 day longer for the teachers on that election day. They would have that day off, where on the other calendar, that day on election day would be a teacher institute. So the students would have a long spring break regardless. And I did talk with Richards today, and they did confirm that their graduation is Thursday, May 27th for next school year. And then on the draft 2 calendar, students would attend that Monday of Thanksgiving, a full day, and then parent conferences would be that Tuesday, and then they would have Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday off. We would have an institute day on the Tuesday after spring break, and then the way it looks now, students would be out before Memorial Day. I will say in the 5 years that I've been part of districts where that's supposed to happen, I believe that only happened once. You seem to get a lot of snow days if you plan on getting out before Memorial Day. And then the other issue possibly with that that I don't know if we have done before, that Friday, which is the last day, would also, in talking with Richards, have to be our graduation. So the students would get out at 1:30, and then graduation would have to be that evening. So those are the main differences between the 2 calendars.
What, would graduation be that Friday regardless of the calendar?
Yes, so they're and I mean, if we decided to draft 1 and we decided to move it to like the day after Memorial Day, that Tuesday, you could do that. But their graduation is Thursday the 27th, and I spoke, Mr. Youngberg spoke, and I spoke with Mr. Jacobson, and he said we would have to have it after their graduation.
Right, so the option could be,
Yeah,
Friday or...
Yeah, in the draft 2 calendar, it would have to be that Friday. If we chose draft 1, we'd have some other options. Any other questions or feedback on the calendar at this point?
What do teachers think about students coming in just for that Monday?
Yeah.
So,
How much
union
stuff
is-
gets done? I don't think it gets
The
done.
union is still going through their feedback, but the teachers definitely enjoyed having that week off. And the argument against that is that our students would be off more time than the Richards students. So,
Did they, when is the starting date on these?
okay, so somehow when it printed in black and white, instead of being a nice smiley face, it looks like a little
The devil.
alien.
Yeah, it's really, yeah, I had, yeah.
But in color, it definitely shows up as a smiley face.
No, not in my color.
Yeah.
It still looks like a little
The
kid.
starting is the same.
Yes, yeah, the main reason you get out earlier is you
Yeah.
find some better days.
When do we have to finalize the
Why is
calendar?
it so early? That seems like a week earlier.
For us starting,
Yes.
it's the same week that we started this past year.
When do we need to finalize the calendar then?
Well, we'd be looking at approving this in March.
That's right.
In general, do we know what the feelings are already, or not really?
The main one is the Thanksgiving. They think that it was very nice to have the week off, and then the kids have that entire time and meeting with parents on that Monday. They'll give me the official feedback, but that's what I received.
I don't know, in the past, like Tiffany has brought this up too, about like, when there are so many days that are like, what, like coming back on a Monday, how much gets done on that Monday anyway? Or even on that same draft one, if they come back the Monday after the holiday or the Tuesday after
Is it
that.
feasible to have a teacher institute day on an election day though?
It
I
is.
mean, parking wise, let's just be honest.
Yeah, well, and,
We've always done that.
Yeah, we've done
Yeah.
it numerous
Okay.
times, and you can, depending on how you split up the buildings and
Okay.
everything, yeah, yep. And if after looking at it more, if you have any other questions or feedback, please let me know. Okay, registration for next school year. I can't believe we're already talking about it. But we are looking at registration being set for Saturday, April 18th, Tuesday, April 24th, and Wednesday, April 22nd. And obviously, if days need to be added, we can do that, and we would talk about that as an admin team. I've been asking the district office to really fill me in on how it is run and to really understand the ins and the outs. And we've been talking about the famous green and red list and all that. So we're making sure that we are ready to go for registration.
Speaking of that,
Yes.
Can school supply lists be talked about at the schools? I don't know how much talk has happened before. I mean, it's never been brought up here, but, well, they are handed out at that
Okay.
time, but as teachers are finalizing what they want, the amount of money that it costs to supply for school supplies is a lot. And so, and I think it's pretty, it's different across
All
the
over
grades
the
as
place.
well. So if that is, could just be looked at to see if there are things that,
And I guess I would just interject too, a lot of times like the kids come home with a lot of stuff that wasn't even used,
Mhm.
like so many folders that weren't even like used.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean, so.
Well, I don't understand why every kid has to have 40 Ziploc. Like, I had like a hard time with like, when I calculated it was like, I don't know what they're doing with all these Ziploc things. So I was curious too about some of the needs.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is to have those discussions. If there are things that they absolutely need,
No, agreed.
but
I mean, like,
if there are things, especially going home, that
you
are
need
costing
Lysol
money.
wipes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
We
I
will
mean, get it,
definitely
but,
take a look at that at each building.
I don't know, like, I just felt like I bought a lot of Ziploc bags. I have 3 kids.
The next item on the agenda, I'm actually pretty excited about. Our principals will be heading to a job fair on March 14th to interview potential candidates for positions we could possibly have open and ones that we think might be open. It's at Homewood Flossmoor High School, and actually it worked out really well. They just sent it over today. Here's the official poster for the job fair that lists all the districts, if you guys want to pass that around. I took part in it last year in my role, and I think we interviewed like 100 people in those 3 hours. We actually found 3 people that we hired, and for the following school year, and my understanding, 2 of them have worked out very well. We all know the shortage that is out there, and that we really need to put ourselves out there. And you see our tablecloth with our logo up here, and that would be the table that our administrators would use. And we're currently putting together kind of a packet, a folder with information about the district, what we have to offer, and it's really just getting our name out there and talking with people. So I'm really
We've never done it.
No, last year was the first year that they had it, and like I said, it was a very positive experience that I went through, and all the principals and assistant principals were on board of going, and they're going to take shifts of who's going to interview, because you don't want all of them sitting at the table at once. But I'm really excited to hear how it goes. Next up, we talked about this a little bit at the study session last month, but our Finance and Facilities Committee did meet and just created kind of a list, a priorities list that they wanted to make sure that was down. And a lot of it is stuff that we've talked about here at this table anyways, but improving the security of the front entrances, I know that is really important to all of us. Looking at the fire alarm panels, which Wes has said once they go, they cannot be fixed or replaced with the current model. And Kathy will talk later about a grant that we're looking at doing with that. Spacing issues, something that we always need to be looking at, even though our population is down 60-some students. We don't know when it could shoot back up, and even if it doesn't, we still have areas that we're crowded. Roofing and lights, especially emergency and exit lights, and then anything with flooring and tiling and carpeting. Additional cameras had been brought up, And then inside the classroom, specifically technology and flexible seating and interventionists and coaches, someone has put down on there. So it's not in a specified order, but those are the things that the committee had talked about, just wanting to look at. And when we have our next meeting with Pat, and Pat has had to share with them, he knows especially things like the security of the front entrances, that's really, really high on our priority list. So, any questions on the Finance and Facilities Committee? Next up is the Finley Outdoor Education Trip, which the board will be asked to approve. My understanding is that students have been going on this trip for 30 years at least, if not longer. And Mr. Youngberg sounds like he is the person to ask if there are any questions, because he has gone many, many years, and if it is approved, we'll be attending again this year. And that is up in Burlington, Wisconsin. It is an overnight trip, which is why it
I
has
was
to
Kate
be.
Wickling when I was the Indian princess.
Oh, wow. So that's why it does need to be approved, because it is an overnight trip. So that will be asked to be approved a little bit later.
I just found one of Leanne's souvenirs from there.
I've had people asking me if the school was still doing it. My assumption was yes.
Yes.
So I feel like if that can come up earlier in the year from now on.
Yeah, so we-
Because that's kind of a hefty price tag too.
Yes.
So parents who don't have olders, who don't know it might be coming, that's a quick turnaround.
Yes, yeah, we will make sure we get that out. And
They do bring it up earlier in the year, don't they?
Yes, they do, with just,
It's like
this is
beginning,
usually when
it's
it's
brought
brought up for approval at the board meeting.
But
Yeah.
like nothing's come home
Okay.
from 6th grade about it.
Yep.
we'll make sure it goes out tomorrow. But, yeah,
Are you
next
sure?
year.
Because my kid already brought it up to me.
I think they've talked about it, that
Yeah,
if
they
this
talk
gets
about it
approved,
for-
but I don't think anything has been sent home
All
officially
through the
yet.
year.
We also had the map results from winter that are in your packet. Hopefully you had a chance to look at it. We did have, let me pull mine out. Which folder I put it in. And you will see them in your packet by the district for our K through 8, and then our EL and special ed. If you look at the far right column, which is really what we look at to have 50% or higher, in math, both in 3rd and 4th grade, we fell fairly below that. Our other grades we were quite happy with, but our 3rd and 4th grade. And then in reading, the same cluster of 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And then we also saw it in 1st grade. I really think the key with this is to do something with it. If we just look at it and say, oh, we didn't do as well as we hoped, there's no point in assessing our kids on this. But the school SIP teams will be taking a look at their individual buildings. They'll look at it by grade level and really try to drill down into exactly why in some grade levels did we far exceed what we wanted to, and then in other ones did we not get where we hoped to. I just have a couple others. I'm really excited for our first recognition dinner that I will get to attend. I wanted to make sure that you had the date on that, and that will be at Gaelic Park on Thursday, April 19th, from 6 to 10 p.m. It is April 9th.
Just to make sure.
Nice.
Yes, April 9th.
Hey, I put the wrong date down enough. I don't need to.
See how I get it. So it is April 9th from 6 to 10 at Gaelic Park. And then the other thing that I just wanted to bring up to the board that Dave Mitchell did reach out to me about doing an active shooter drill, which they do every single year. It will be while we're on spring break, and it will be the Monday and Wednesday at Ridge Central. So no students will be there, and so that is when that they will be completing that.
Can you make sure to send something out to
To let them
community
know
so they
why
know
there are
there's-
so many
yes.
people there? Yes, sure.
And there never is children
Correct.
when they do that.
Yes, yeah. I would fight against that tooth and nail. So,
Is there, can the village send it out too, so that it's not just going to families, but?
But so that everybody can see it?
Community? Yes.
I can ask them for sure.
Send a blast email to her.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy.
Okay, thank you.
Every year we apply for the property tax relief grant, and we really never anticipate getting it, and we did not get it again this year. Which really it's a good thing, because it means our tax rate compared to other school district is relatively lower. So we will certainly continue to apply for that each year if it's available by the state. School fees, every year this time we ask the board to approve school fees for the next year, and this year we're not recommending any change. The Findlay Junior High fees would be $130 and the elementary schools would be $100. Keep in mind, we do offer a discount of $30 per child for any family that comes to those days in April and pays in full. And so we would be asking the board to approve that, and also any children in number 4 child and beyond are free. So you'd really always just be paying for the first 3. So no change in that. And then I'll be asking the board to approve the renewal of the milk contract with Cloverleaf Farms. We've been very happy with them again this year, and they are requesting a 1-cent increase per half pint of both chocolate and white milk. And then my next issue is the printer replacement. We had a real good discussion at the study session last in January, and we've been talking about this some time now. So our printers are out of date. We're actually running about 6.5 years now. And so when the board packet went out on Friday, I didn't have all of my information together, so I emailed you yesterday with my recommendation. And what we did is we reevaluated both proposals. We've had 2 vendors that have really been kind of neck and neck through this evaluation. We looked at cost, of course. We looked at customer service and reliability. We went back to the principals one more time and asked them to kind of confirm our configuration. We want to make sure all the teachers have the right equipment and enough equipment to do their jobs. And so the proposals in your packet, I still gave you each vendor's proposal, is for 17 new printers and a maintenance contract on those 17 printers, and the 3 printers that are in the Smart Lab that are relatively new. We're going to hang on to that, but the vendor will also service those as well. And on the board agenda, you'll see 2 different items. The first one is going to be between the lease option and the equipment pre-purchase agreement. And after looking at it, I would ask the board to approve a lease agreement rather than the money up front. I think that's a fiscally responsible decision because the interest rate was not very high at all. And then the second motion would be to name the company, and I'd be actually asking you to approve a monthly lease in the amount of $1,847 with Image Tech. Any questions on that? Okay. The next thing, Dr. Thorne's touched on this a little bit, is our school maintenance project grant application. That is that dollar for dollar grant that we have with the state. It's been several years since they came out with it, so we really want to take an opportunity to apply for it. And if the board approves, we will be asking Studio GC to submit this grant to the state on our behalf. And again, we discussed last time at the study session that the fire alarm panels are in need of replacement. So we kind of earmarked that for that. Okay, the next thing, the storm damage. Way back in May, we had that huge hailstorm. And we had the insurance company come out and assess the damage. When they originally assessed the damage, it was much higher than what they were able to repair. And we talked about this before, the smaller units that they wanted to fix as well, it wasn't worth their trouble, quite honestly. They thought that if they repaired it, it would actually do more damage to the units. So they actually did all the work they could. They did some roofing work, some HVAC work, and they're going to give us some money for some screen damage at Ridge Lawn. And they refunded us $47,753. And so my recommendation is just obviously to accept that money. It's storm damage that we are legally entitled to. And then in discussions with moving forward on facilities with the architect, see what we really want to do with that money. Because right now, $47,000 alone isn't really going to do much for HVAC. So we don't want to just, throw good money. So we're just going to hang on to that. And then the next thing is, last week in January, we had the auditor from the Illinois State Board of Education going over our food service program. There's actually 3 different reviews they do, and this is what they call the administrative review. The school picked was Ridge Lawn, and they really, really did a nice job. I did include the preliminary report in your board report, and you will see, we did get dinged on a few issues. Reporting wasn't as it should be. One of the meal preps didn't have a starch in it. So they gave us a lot of real good feedback. And so when all 3 review results come back in March, I will go a little bit more into detail. But they did assure us that there's no financial consequences. We really run a pretty good program here. And Ridge Central is in need of new lunch tables and benches. And we've known this for a little while. And I want to thank Megan for kind of taking the lead and getting the quotes on this. One of the tables literally fell apart, one of the lunch tables, and that was kind of the last straw. Like, we really have to get moving on this. So in your proposal, there is a quote for 5 new tables and 8 benches. Megan had her custodians go through the lunchroom and do an inventory of what really needed to be replaced. And those tables are rather unique because that space is also doubles as a gym. So they go into those cabinets that are anchored to the walls. So we really didn't have a lot of leeway in shopping around. And the reason I'm bringing it to the board is it is in excess of $10,000, so we will need board approval. And then finally, I just wanted to give everybody the heads up. My goal is at the February study session to really start giving you information and having some good discussions on the Minimum Wage Act. Right now, the minimum wage in Illinois is $9.25 an hour, and that was effective January 1 of this year. July 1 of this year, it actually goes up to $10. Then every year after that, it goes up $1 till it reaches 2025, where it will be $15. So just wanted to give you the heads up that hopefully I'll have some worksheets and we'll have some real good discussions at the February study session about that.
Those $1 an hour, does it go as of January 1st or as of July 1st?
January 1st.
Okay.
This was the only year they had 2 bumps.
Okay.
They had a
That's
bump
what I
as
wanted
of
to make sure.
January and of July. After that, they'll all be as of January.
Okay.
Mhm. That's all I have.
Old business.
So we have a list of policies to either adopt or post for a second reading. Remember when we looked at these before, they are the ones that, now that we have 2 contracts, that just say to refer to the individual contracts instead of trying to spell out both things in the policy.
I'll make a motion to adopt.
Second it.
Mrs. Killen.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mr. Holman.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Ms. Davenport.
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle.
Aye.
Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. New business, we have potential action to approve school fees for the 2020-21. No changes from previous fees.
Out loud, you said 100 for K-5 and 130, but here it says 120 for K-5.
I thought it said around $10.
130.
No, you did say, yeah, you did, yeah.
Did I
It's just a
misspeak?
misspoke.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
You had the
Yeah, you just.
junior high correct, but the K through 5 is incorrect, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so it's correct as written.
Yes,
And
thank
that's
you.
the same.
Same as this year.
Right.
Yeah. So, we need a motion?
Yes, we do.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
I have Mrs. Egan first on the second. Mr. Hillman.
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Mrs. Callen.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Ms. Davenport.
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Potential board action to approve, to post for a first reading of the following policies. Do I have to read the numbers and I can just go through real quick? Accountings and audits, hiring and process criteria. Question, has the board adopted exceptions to this policy? Adding to number 5, following, unless the applicant's wage or salary history is a matter of public record or is contained in a document completed by the applicant's current or former employer, then made available to the public by employer, or then submitted or posted by the employer to comply with state or federal law, or applicant is current employee applying for a position with the same employer.
If you remember, that question was really, you're not supposed to have a wage question on applications anymore, and there's some gray area, but instead of opening us up to possible litigation, we're going to continue to keep that off, because most positions for public educators, you can find that information on your own anyways.
So do we need to, I'm not understanding what we're trying to do here.
We're not
We
gonna
need to
adopt.
pull that
Yeah.
from,
That's
No,
the
we want to
discussion.
keep it, and the administrative recommend is not to adopt.
but we're still putting it on display?
As the question, we have to put that we're not adopting it, yes.
Administrative recommendation was not to adopt on that particular one. We have terms of conditions of employment and dismissal, leaves of absence, employment termination, suspension, sick days, vacation days, holidays, leaves, curriculum and content. The question for curriculum and content, if boards want to offer a course on hunting safety as part of the curriculum, and we've said no. That has a lot to do with down south, because they actually have it there. They even get days off to go hunting. So that's just part of, our state down there. That's what they do. Administrative medicine to students. The question, has the board adopted a school district supply of undesignated gluten subsection? And we're saying no. That has to do with diabetes, am I correct?
Correct. So if we voted yes for the policy, we would immediately have to try to procure a prescription, and we would have to keep it on hand at all times, make sure it never expired. We also said that if we ever come to that where we have students that we think that that could be an issue, we could come back and revisit it. But that's why the recommendation is no at this time.
Okay, visitors to and conduct on school property communications using district-provided telephone, electronic email. The question is, the board want to narrow the policy to mirror 105 ILCS 524-24, recommending no.
Yes, and that was when, if we had someone who, let's say, was removed from a Finley volleyball game and was told that you cannot come to any school events, by saying no, they are banned from the school, but if they still want to come to the school board to speak, that would have to be a separate ban if we decided to put no. If we put yes, you would be banning them from both, and then there's some freedom of speech issues with that. So.
Okay. So we need a motion to post.
I'll make the motion to post for first reading.
I will second it.
Ms. Davenport.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Lamb.
Aye.
Mrs. Callen.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Mr. Hillman.
Aye.
Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Potential action to approve outdoor educational field trip on the April 16th, 17th.
I'll make the motion to approve it.
I'll second.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mr. Hillman.
Aye.
Ms. Davenport.
Aye.
Mrs. Callen.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle.
Aye.
Mrs. Salzer.
Yes. Potential to approve action for the Clover Leaf Farm Distributors mail contract renewal. Milk contract, I'm sorry, not mail.
I'll second it.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Callen.
Aye.
Mr. Hillman.
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle.
Aye.
Ms. Davenport.
Aye.
Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Potential board action to approve school maintenance project grant application. Motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second. Second by your arms.
Mrs. Lammle.
Aye.
Ms. Davenport.
Aye.
Mr. Hillman.
Aye.
Mrs. Callen.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Potential board action to authorize Studio G to solicit bids for school maintenance project grant pending approval. Motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Mrs. Callen.
Aye.
Mrs. Lamel.
Aye.
Ms. Davenport.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mr. Hillman.
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Potential board action to approve purchase of lunch tables and benches for Ridge Central in amount of $11,908 from Midwest Educational Furnishings.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Mr. Hillman.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Ms. Davenport.
Aye.
Mrs. Lamel.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Callen.
Just one question. Is it okay if I ask a question about that? How many of the tables are gonna be replaced?
There
A
will-
portion of them?
Yes, just the ones that truly need it. There's 5 of them.
5 are gonna be replaced.
Correct, in 8 benches.
Okay, and then how many are left?
Megan, can you,
We probably have 15 other tables.
Okay, I was just wondering.
what proportion?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably a quarter,
Okay.
a third.
All right, aye.
And Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Board action, potential board action to approve vendor contract for maintenance on printers. Oh, I'm sorry, back it up, we gotta do the other one first. Potential board action to approve vendor contract on purchase or lease of printers.
And if we could state in the motion for the lease of printers.
Okay, for the lease of printers, not purchase.
I'll move to approve the vendor for the contract for the lease of printers.
I'll second.
I can have Mrs. Petropoulos first. Ms. Davenport.
Aye.
Mr. Hillman.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Lamel.
Aye.
Mrs. Callen.
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Excuse me, potential board action to approve vendor contract for maintenance on printers.
I'll make a motion
And I'm sorry, if we could just add with image tech.
with.
Oh, with Image Tech.
Now,
Image tech.
yes, I still.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Ms. Davenport.
Aye.
Mr. Hillman.
Aye.
Mrs. Callen.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Lamel.
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Okay. So, opportunity for visitors to speak? Anybody? Don't have to ask me time for something. Opportunity for visitors to speak, one more time, opportunities for visitors to speak. Anybody? Nobody? Okay. At this time then, we'll be adjourning to closed session.
Actually, Mrs. Salzer, there's 4 minutes prerogative. Do you have anything you want to?
I said a lot last time. Other than, I really appreciate the standard-based grading work you guys have done. It's unbelievable, yes, and it's a long time coming. I still have a problem with the homework, so. But that's okay. Yeah, I'm glad we're doing it. Okay, so we're going to adjourn to closed session for the purpose of discussion.
Discussion of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body to determine its validity as defined in the Open Meetings Act, Section 2C1, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or the representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees as defined in Section C2. And the discussion of minutes of prior meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meeting Acts as defined in Section 2C21 for the purpose of review, approval, or release of such minutes. We will not be discussing security measures or student discipline or the discussion of pending or probable imminent litigation.
7:55.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
And a second.
Second.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Lamel.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Mrs. Callen.
Aye.
Ms. Davenport.
Aye.
Mr. Hillman.
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer.
Aye.
16.1, potential board action on personal consent agenda. We have Timothy McElhaney, paraprofessional at Finley Junior High at a rate of $12 an hour starting January 21st. Patricia Fahey, evening custodian at Ridge Central at a rate of $11.99. Danette Keeler, long-term substitute for reading specialist at Finley at a rate of $140 with a start date of March 10th. Lower Courts Employee Benefits Secretary at District Office, starting date to be determined at a rate of $16 an hour, and substitute teacher list containing the names of Jamila Shavi.
Sure.
Can
I'll
we
make a
have-
motion.
I'll second.
Mrs. Callen?
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle?
Aye.
Ms. Davenport?
Aye.
Mrs. Egan?
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos?
Aye.
Mr. Hillman?
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer.
Aye.
Okay, and on 16.2, remember this is the one that we discussed that we do not believe.
I thought it was
No, no.
16.3.
Six-
We do.
Yes, 16.3, yep.
No, we're on 16.2.
Yes, so
Two is the Mary Ann
16.2,
Nolan.
we had decided that yes, we would
Yes.
approve. 16.3, that no, it is most likely not eligible. 16.2, potential board action to approve the retirement request with incentives for Mary Ann Nolan, second grade teacher at Ridge Central, to conclude employment with the district at the end of the 2023-24 school year.
I'll make a motion.
Can we get a second?
I'll make a second.
Mrs. Egan?
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos?
Aye.
Mrs. Callen?
Aye.
Mr. Hillman?
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle?
Aye.
Ms. Davenport?
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer.
Aye.
Potential board action to approve the retirement request with incentives for Marianne Haas, third grade teacher at Ridge Central, to conclude employment with the district at the end of 2022-2023 school year.
Can I ask a quick question? I know that, so do we still have to approve that she can retire at that point?
No.
Okay.
No.
Right, that's all I was asking. I didn't know if we had to approve retirement or if it was only approval of the incentives. Okay.
So no motion.
Yeah, we need a motion.
No.
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 Please make a motion.
Oh, okay.
Okay, 16.4, potential board action to approve 2 unpaid leave of absence days for Nancy Gabon, parent liaison at Finley Junior High and Ridge Central. And remember, this was retroactive.
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Elaine made the motion.
I'll second.
Mrs. Egan?
Aye.
Ms. Davenport?
Aye.
Mr. Hillman?
Aye.
Mrs. Callen?
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos?
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle?
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer.
Aye.
And potential board action, 16.5 on resolution releasing closed session minutes and destruction of verbatim recordings 18 months and older.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Ms. Davenport?
Aye.
Mr. Hillman?
Aye.
Mrs. Egan?
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos?
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle?
Aye.
Mrs. Callen?
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer.
Aye.
You're making a motion to approve. Nobody wants to make a motion to approve.
That's it, right?
Do we need to make a motion to deny that?
We can at the end here, yes. Can we have a motion to deny the retirement request for incentives for Marianne Haas, third grade teacher at Ridge Central, to conclude employment with the district at the end of the 2022-23 school year?
I'll make that motion.
That was Mary.
I'll second.
Chrissy. Mrs. Lammle?
Aye.
Mrs. Davenport?
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos?
Aye.
Mrs. Callen?
Aye.
Mr. Hillman?
I abstain.
Mrs. Egan?
I abstain.
And Mrs. Salzer.
Aye.
We have a motion to close the meeting.
I'll make the motion.
We get a second.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.